You think you want peace. You say you want a quieter mind, a calmer life, a day that doesn't feel so heavy inside. But then, something strange happens. The moment life becomes a little quieter, your mind starts making noise again. No one texted anything bad. No crisis happened. No real problem is standing in front of you. And still, your mind starts searching. It searches for what might go wrong, for what you forgot, for what someone meant by that look, that message, that tone. It replays old conversations. It predicts future problems. It creates pressure before pressure even arrives. And if you've ever caught yourself doing that, here's the uncomfortable truth. Your mind is not always choosing stress, because stress is forced on you. Sometimes your mind chooses stress, because stress feels more familiar than peace. That's the part most people never talk about. We like to believe stress is just something that attacks us from the outside. Work stresses us. People stress us. Money stresses us. Life stresses us. And yes, sometimes that's true. But there's another layer that's harder to admit. Sometimes the outside situation gets quiet, but the inside doesn't. Sometimes the meeting ends, but your body still feels tense. The message is over. But your mind keeps arguing. The day is free. But you still feel like something is wrong. The room is calm, but your nervous system is not. Why? Because peace is not just something you want. Peace is something your mind has to learn how to trust. And for many people, it doesn't. Not right away. Because stress, as exhausting as it is, can create a weird kind of comfort. Not a happy comfort. Not a healthy comfort. But a familiar one. Stress can feel like you are doing something. It can feel like preparation. It can feel like control. It can feel like responsibility. It can feel like staying sharp, like staying ahead, like protecting yourself from surprise. So even while stress drains you, another part of you keeps returning to it. Because to that part of your mind, stress feels safer than openness. That is the conflict. You say you want peace, but your mind trusts stress more. And once you understand that, a lot of confusing behavior starts making sense. Why do some people finish one problem and immediately go looking for another? Why do they finally get a quiet night and then feel restless instead of relieved? Why do they sit down to rest and suddenly remember 5 new things to worry about? Why do they keep checking their phone, refreshing their thoughts, replaying things that are already done? It's not always because they love suffering. Sometimes it's because stillness feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can feel unsafe. That's the hidden pattern. A mind that has lived in tension for too long starts mistaking tension for normal. It starts mistaking inner pressure for productivity. It starts mistaking hyper-alertness for wisdom. It starts mistaking worry for care. It starts mistaking exhaustion for seriousness. And eventually, peace doesn't feel like peace anymore. It feels suspicious. A quiet day feels too empty. A simple moment feels too exposed. A calm relationship feels almost boring. A problem-free evening feels like you must be forgetting something. So the mind does what it has learned to do. It creates movement. It creates friction. It creates a reason to stay activated. Because activation feels familiar, and the familiar, even when painful, often feels easier to trust than the peaceful. Think about that. A lot of people don't struggle because they are weak. They struggle because their inner system has been trained to treat stress like home. Maybe because they grew up around unpredictability. Maybe because peace never lasted long enough to feel real. Maybe because being relaxed used to mean getting caught off guard. Maybe because they were praised for overperforming, overthinking, overcaring, overfunctioning. Maybe because no one ever taught them. That calm can also be a form of strength. So their mind adapted. It learned. Stay ready. Stay tense. Stay braced. Expect the shift. Watch for disappointment. Prepare for the problem before the problem arrives. And that adaptation may have protected you once. That's important to understand, because if you don't understand that, you'll judge yourself too quickly. You'll say, "Why am I like this? Why can't I just relax? Why do I ruin my own peace? Why do I make everything heavy?" But shame doesn't solve patterns. Awareness does. Your mind is not broken. It is trained. That changes everything. Broken sounds hopeless. Trained means there is a pattern. And if there is a pattern, there can be retraining. But before you retrain it, you have to see it clearly. You have to notice the small moments when your mind chooses stress automatically, the moment your body starts tightening for no real reason, the moment you assume the worst before checking the facts, the moment silence makes you uncomfortable, the moment rest starts feeling guilty, the moment you turn one uncertain thing into a full mental emergency. That's the doorway. Because most people think the real issue is the big stressful moment. It isn't. The real issue is the automatic return, the automatic reaching, the automatic bracing, the automatic thought loop, the automatic urge to fill every quiet space with fear, planning, or pressure. That is where stress becomes a habit, not just a feeling. Habit. And habits are dangerous because they stop feeling optional. You don't feel like you're choosing them anymore. You feel like that's just who you are. You say, "I'm just an anxious person. I'm just intense. I'm just always thinking. I'm just wired this way." But often, what you call personality is just repeated survival. Repeated often enough to feel permanent. Repeated long enough to become identity. Repeated so many times that you stop questioning it. That's how people become loyal to what is hurting them, not because they enjoy it, but because they have built familiarity around it, and familiarity is powerful. People stay in draining relationships because chaos feels known. People stay in self-sabotaging routines because struggle feels known. People stay mentally tense because tension feels known. Known does not mean safe. Known just means practiced. And that's one of the biggest lies. The mind can tell. If it feels familiar, it must be right. No, sometimes it just means you have rehearsed it 1,000 times. And peace may feel wrong, not because it is wrong, but because you haven't practiced it enough. That's why peace can feel uncomfortable before it feels healing. Let's be honest. For some people, peace feels empty at first, like nothing is happening, like they are wasting time, like they should be doing more, fixing more, carrying more, preparing more. They sit in stillness and don't feel free. They feel exposed. Why? Because stress gave them structure. Stress gave them a role, a task, a focus, a reason to stay in motion, a way to avoid deeper emotion. And this is where the conversation gets even more honest. Sometimes stress is not just about what might happen. Sometimes stress is a shield against what you would feel if you slowed down. The grief you never fully felt, the anger you swallowed, the rejection you minimized, the loneliness you covered with busyness, the emptiness you kept trying to outrun. The fear that if you stop thinking, fixing, and managing for 1 second, something inside you will finally catch up with you. That's why peace can feel so hard, because peace removes the noise, and when the noise disappears, the buried things become louder. So, the mind brings the noise back. A new worry, a new pressure, a new imagined problem, a new reason to stay mentally occupied. Again, not because you want pain, but because a distracted mind doesn't have to feel everything underneath. That's why some people say they want a calmer life, but unconsciously resist the very conditions that would create it. They overbook themselves. They stay in constant stimulation. They check, scroll, refresh, compare. They create urgency where none exists. They turn rest into guilt. They turn ease into suspicion. And then they wonder why peace never stays. But peace cannot stay in a mind that keeps treating calm like a threat. Read that again. Peace cannot stay in a mind that keeps treating calm like a threat. So what changes this? Not one big breakthrough. Not one motivational quote. Not one perfect morning routine. What changes it is retraining. Slow retraining. The kind that looks boring from the outside, but revolutionary on the inside. It starts with catching the moment. Your mind reaches for unnecessary stress. You finish your work and suddenly feel uneasy. Instead of instantly opening a new problem, you pause. You notice, my mind is trying to create pressure because calm feels unfamiliar. That one sentence is powerful because it interrupts the old illusion that stress is always truth. Sometimes stress is not wisdom. Sometimes it is memory. Sometimes it is conditioning. Sometimes it is an old alarm, still ringing in a room, that is no longer on fire. And emotional maturity is learning not to obey every alarm automatically. It is learning to check the room, to ask, is something actually wrong right now? Or is my system reaching for the familiar? Am I responding to reality? Or replaying an old pattern? That pause matters, because without that pause, you merge with the pattern. With it, you separate from it. And once you separate from a pattern, you can start changing it. Then comes the harder part, staying in peace long enough for your mind to stop distrusting it. Not forever, just a little longer than usual, a little more silence before grabbing your phone, a few more breaths before solving something that doesn't need solving, a quiet walk without feeding your head another problem, an evening where you let things be unfinished without turning that into panic. At first, this may not feel peaceful. It may feel restless, wrong, unnatural, even irritating. That doesn't mean you're failing. It often means your system is detoxing from tension. You are meeting the discomfort of a mind that has been overfed on urgency. And yes, some people are addicted to urgency, not in a dramatic way, in a subtle way. They feel most alive when managing something, most needed when carrying something heavy, most valuable when under pressure, most familiar with themselves, when there is a problem to solve. So when there is no problem, they don't feel relaxed. They feel empty. That's why healing is not just removing stress. Healing is learning how to exist without needing constant inner friction to feel real. That is a deeper change. It means redefining what strength looks like. Not constant tension, not endless readiness, not always being mentally loaded. Real strength is being able to stay soft without becoming careless, to stay calm without becoming passive, to stay grounded without manufacturing struggle, just to feel in control. That kind of strength is rare, and it begins with self-respect, because self-respect says, I do not need chaos to prove I care. I do not need pressure to prove I am responsible. I do not need constant worry to prove I am serious about my life. I do not need to stay mentally clenched, just because that's what I'm used to. That is the shift. The moment you stop worshiping stress as evidence of importance, your whole inner world begins to change. You stop feeding every fearful thought. You stop turning every unknown into danger. You stop acting like peace has to be earned through exhaustion. And slowly, your mind starts learning a new truth. Calm is not laziness. Stillness is not weakness. Rest is not irresponsibility. Peace is not a trap. It is just unfamiliar. For now. And unfamiliar does not stay unfamiliar forever. What you repeat becomes normal. What you practice becomes safer. What you stay with becomes easier to trust. That means peace can become familiar too. Not overnight, but over time, with repetition, with awareness, with moments where you catch yourself reaching for stress and choose not to follow. That's how the change happens. Not all at once, but one interrupted pattern at a time. One quiet moment you stop sabotaging. One breath you don't fill with panic. One evening you don't turn into mental punishment. One simple day you allow to be simple. And eventually, peace stops feeling empty. It starts feeling clean. Stillness stops feeling threatening. It starts feeling spacious. Rest stops feeling guilty. It starts feeling intelligent. And the mind that once trusted stress more than peace begins to realize something powerful. Familiarity was never the same thing as safety. Just because stress felt like home doesn't mean it was healthy. And just because peace feels unfamiliar today doesn't mean it isn't where healing begins. So if your mind keeps choosing stress over peace, don't shame yourself for that. Understand it. Because once you understand that this is a learned pattern, not your identity, you stop asking, what's wrong with me? And you start asking a better question. What has my mind been trained to trust? That question can change your life. Because maybe your mind trusted stress for years. Maybe it built a home there. Maybe it learned to survive there. But survival is not the same as peace. And staying trapped in stress, just because it feels familiar, is not strength. Real strength is teaching your mind that calm is not dangerous anymore. And the first step is simple. Not easy, but simple. Stop running. The moment peace feels strange, stay there a little longer. That's where your new life begins.